Let's talk about the update in the Bessemer, Alabama Amazon campaign. We had big news, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before. I guess it was yesterday because yesterday was a Monday. The NLRB the National Labor Relations Board has agreed with the recommendation of the regional officer to throw out the results of the last election in Bessemer because of egregious interference and a blatant disregard for the election process that made laboratory conditions necessary for a fair election impossible. So Amazon workers in Bessemer will get another election. This has been what has been expected for months now because of the absolutely blatant disregard for the law that the boss had at Bessemer, at Amazon in Bessemer. So this is what people have been expecting, but it's now final. The decision has been made. Workers will get another chance at a fair and free election. The date and method has not been determined yet. Last time, the union was pushing for mail-in ballots, and I believe that they are going to be okay with in-person voting this time, as long as it's, at a fair location. The date has not been determined yet, but in the NLRB's announcement, they said that it is probably going to be in the spring. So be on the lookout for that. And, of course, the boss's propaganda outlets have already pounced on the announcement, saying that the campaign was an out-of-state effort because politicians outside Alabama supported the workers while politicians in our state sat on their asses. The writer who said that was invited to come on the show, and of course, we heard what you might call radio silence from him because attacking the campaign as an out-of-state effort is absolutely nonsensical if you have read anything other than Amazon press releases. The campaign started with Alabama workers at Amazon coming to an Alabama union, the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union's Mid-South Council, that represents some 10,000 workers in the South, including Alabama butchers, Alabama warehouse workers, and Alabama poultry workers, among others. They also now represent brake pad manufacturers as a result of a successful election here in Alabama some time ago. And the lead organizer was an Alabama youth pastor, and most of the organizers involved were workers at RWDSU, Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union work sites in Alabama. This was an Alabama campaign led by Alabama workers that went up against the most powerful corporation in the world and scared them so badly that they spent tens of millions of dollars. The best estimate that I've been able to find puts it at something near $30 million that was spent by Amazon to try to railroad the workers and try to rob them of their opportunity for a free and fair election. And not only did they spend millions of dollars and hire outside parties, they try to make this sound like an out-of-state effort, but who did Amazon hire? Amazon hired an out-of-state law firm that specializes in union busting and paid them millions of dollars to do that. I have a friend who worked for one of the only union-side law firms in the state of Alabama for some time, and he said that it was amazing just how much Amazon's lawyers did in this case. He said he read some of their briefs, some of the things that they submit. I forget what he calls them, but some of the things that they submitted to the court, and he was like, I can't imagine how much these lawyers' fees would be. This is insane. I told him that money's cheap when you're the richest man in the world. So not only did they spend all that money, but they broke the law. These Alabama workers scared Amazon so bad that they were not willing to interfere with the election in ways that are legal, which is many. I mean, the ways, and we'll get into this later in the show, but the ways that you can interfere in an election and still be above board as far as the law is concerned is frankly horrific. The things that go on in a union election by the boss are things that we would never in a million years accept in an election for public office, but we accept it in union elections. Why? Because, that's the boss's domain. So it's really insane.
Jacob, before you move on, I wanted to just point out that, one of the most common criticisms of unions is that it's going to drive up costs for the company.
Yeah.
But here we have the company just blowing millions to defeat this effort, and you can't convince me that somehow that was cost effective. And, I think you also nailed something, which is there's a cottage industry of union busting, especially among law firms. And lawyers, they work by billable hours. So if they've got an opportunity to rack up those hours, of course they're going to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just did some quick back-of-the-envelope math here. $30 million divided by 6,000 employees, which is the latest estimate on how many people were working there at the time of the election, would be $5,000 per employee. Instead of, instead of doing that, they could have written a huge check to these workers, bought them all a nice car. But they wanted to spend all that money so that they could continue to exploit them and continue to bargain with them individually. The reason that is such a good deal for the boss is that when you bargain individually, you have much less power than when you bargain collectively. And that's obvious when you think about, okay, if all, 12 of the people at the small business that I work for, let's say, if all 12 of us go and bargain together, we have a lot more power than if all 12 of us go individually. And if we go individually, we can be whipsawed against one another, be pitted against each other, instead of all working together to bring everyone up, instead of clawing over the bodies of our brothers and sisters. So, like I said, Amazon pulled lots of dirty tricks, some of them legal and some of them not. And the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades has a great video that is going to show you, that shows you some of the things that workers at Amazon had to go through. So, Adam, if you could play that for us.
Imagine this. You're an American worker and you decide you want to exercise your right to collectively bargain in your workplace. That it's in your best interest to come together with coworkers to take on issues impacting everyone, like pay, benefits, and more. Rather than struggling alone, you approach some coworkers to see if they're interested in taking on some of the same workplace issues together. You assume that with a simple majority vote, 50+1, you could choose workplace representatives the same way you vote in an election. But if you are a worker in the U.S., this is where it all goes wrong. More than half of American workers are threatened with job loss if they vote for workplace representation, and 1 in 5 are fired. Then, 90% of American workers who seek to collectively bargain are forced to sit through mandatory meetings to be told by your employer about why workplace democracy and collective bargaining is bad. On average, employers hold 9 captive audience meetings during the election campaign. At the same time, you'll be bombarded with communications from firms outside your workplace who never reveal themselves, yet were hired to do nothing but convince you the improvements you seek are wrong. Even if you make it past all of this and the workplace election is successful, your employer can refuse to recognize the results of the election or refuse to negotiate. This happens in more than half of all successful workplace elections. Workplace elections happen nearly every day in the United States. But sadly, due to our fundamentally broken labor laws, workplace elections are deeply undemocratic, and the deck is stacked against workers in every single one of them. We need to defend the rights of Americans to collectively bargain fairly, and must ensure the fight for voting rights is extended to the elections that happen in workplaces every single day. We can do this by fixing our labor laws and ensuring the passage of the PRO Act this year. It is our right to have our voices heard and to vote both inside and outside the workplace, and we must fight again to ensure these rights are recognized.
All right, that video was courtesy of our brothers and sisters in the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Folks, you should follow them on Twitter. They are constantly putting out really good videos like that. The Twitter is @GoIUPAT, @GoIUPAT. They have got some really good videos. Honestly, they have the best and most consistent, short informative videos on social media that you're going to be able to find. They're really, really good. And, the passage of the PRO Act is such an important such an important thing to be able to even the playing field between workers and bosses in this country, because like I said, there are so many things that are legal for bosses to do that is not going to, and then not only is there all sorts of things that are legal, like they talked about the captive audience meetings. That's legal. Your boss can make you, at threat of termination, sit through however many hours of propaganda and threats and innuendos that they want with no retaliation. That is totally legal. And if just think about that in any other election. Think about if Democrats or Republicans had the authority to round up any and all voters that they wanted and make them, at threat of job loss, sit through a presentation about how good they are and how bad the other people are. That's just totally goes against democratic values, does not make sense. And yet it's legal. And then where things are not legal, there's no penalties. There are literally no fines associated with breaking provisions of the NLRA. The penalty for Amazon in breaking the law as flagrantly as they did is just having another election. That's it. There's no fines. There's no other penalty. They just have to have another election. And like I said, money is cheap when you're the richest man on earth, but money and time is not cheap when you're an organization of normal, everyday, working people, and you have to go through this again instead of just having had a fair and free election from the beginning. I mean, it's the laws are totally stacked against workers in this country, and we've got to do something about that.